DeMarco, I guess just how was your first camp with a new team? Just kind of getting used to everything, how things work here.
Camp's been good. Camp's always going to be camp. Just having that mental fortitude to just, come in every day and just prepare to get better. But yeah, it's been a good camp.
Marco, how the scrimmage go on Saturday? Just how would you assess how you did personally, and what can you tell us just about how the defense looked overall?
It was a good scrimmage. It was a tight scrimmage, battling back and forth. I think I did a good job of taking what was coached in previous practices and what I learned over the summer. I think the defense really stepped up. I think one thing we just can do is just continue to grow and get better and become situationally aware in some phases. But I think defense is making a big step.
Are you still working on primarily at Star?
Yes, primarily at Star, working at our money spot too, and just trying to be able to play any position they need me to play.
You played last year at safety with Memphis. What are some of the similarities and differences you just see from playing at safety to moving back to a star role in the linebacker room?
I think the main thing is still playing in space. Being the boundary safety last year, it's a little bit more vertical, but now it's more lateral than getting downhill. I think it's just being able to trigger a little bit faster. I don't have to be as patient as I was at safety. I think that was the main difference.
How does your skill set fit that role here?
Just being able to be able to have the frame of a linebacker, but also being able to cover. I think that's a big thing that, being a star in this defense, you have to be able to do. And it's just being able to have that footwork to be able to play both run and pass.
You guys have a lot of different linebackers that can push for playing time. What's it like just competing every day in and out with camp with just 5 or 6, 7 guys that can really go out there and perform? On this team this year, I feel like this linebacker room really wants to get better. Everybody wants to play. Everybody's hungry. There's competition every day, and that makes you want to be better yourself because you don't want to get complacent. You don't want to have somebody jump you in the depth chart, but that's what college football is. And just everybody wanting to get better, that just makes me want to get better too.
Who are some of the guys that are really pushing you and pushing for playing time?
I think Devin Bruin, he wants to be able to play everything. He would take all the reps if he could. I think Cam Lindsey and Manny, all these guys, like everybody, even the young guys, Dez and Marcus, they all want to get better, and they all just want to be able to get on the field. I think, honestly, we could travel the whole linebacker room on special teams if we could. I think that's how competitive this room is.
DeMarco, just being a guy with a lot of background in coverage, and now here at Pitt being entrusted to do some of the same duties, just what can you tell us about Mason Heintschel? Just maybe what stuck out to you about him, how he approaches the quarterback position, just the kind of quarterback he is.
From what I've seen, when you're on a team that respects your quarterback, that's a great team. And I think this whole team respects Mason. There's things he does in his game that makes me have to ask him questions, like what he's seen, why he throw this and not that. And his technique and footwork, it keeps you on your toes. It makes you have to play smart and play with good technique yourself.
Questions for Mason,
Mason,
how did the scrimmage go on Saturday? What was clicking for the offense that day?
Yeah, I thought it went pretty well. There were a couple little things that we've been preaching that we got to clean up a little bit. Me doing a couple dumb things. Just trying to do too much, trying to do too much instead of just checking it down and taking what the defense has given us. But all in all, I think we looked really good offensively. A couple of times we back ourselves up, but other than that. Wide receivers winning their one-on-ones, doing a really great job, getting on toes and winning. Up front, we're doing a really great job, and running backs look great too. So, very pleased with how we're looking offensively. And then, obviously, defensively, doing a great job too. Obviously, it was a pretty close scrimmage, so, they're doing well on their side.
Any big plays, guys you were connecting with
There was definitely a couple with Blue. He did a really fantastic job of taking the top off a couple of times. CJ had one or two at least. TK is doing a really great job, just really being detailed with his routes. I'm very pleased with how he's looked. Malik with the twos a couple times was doing a really great job of winning. Holden doing a really great job of putting it on him and making some explosives. Obviously we had a couple big runs. I think Ferg had a busted one off kind of from, I think it was like a 50-yard rush. So he's looked good too. I think just all in all, just very pleased with how we've looked so far.
What have you seen from Ferguson, and just what makes him maybe different in that running back room?
Yeah, absolutely. He's just it's another face, another weapon that we have to add to that really dynamic running room, which is great for us. He does a lot of great things, and especially for how young he is, he's really done a fantastic job of adapting. He came in a little later, so it's tough for him to pick up on the offense. We're doing a lot in fall camp, kind of moving progressively pretty fast as far as install goes. But I think he's doing a really great job of picking it up and just playing fast. That's all we ask for in this offense is just playing at a high level, not thinking as much, and just kind of just going out and playing. And he's a playmaker for sure.
Aside from the leadership component of the quarterback position, which we've talked a lot with you just over the course of the offseason, what aspects of your game are you really kind of honing into as far as really wanting to take the next step and improve upon from what you did last year?
Yeah. For starters, I think it's, up front. I think it all starts up front and, getting us into the right protections, kind of identifying, blitzers, all that kind of stuff, and, seeing, picking up on tendencies the defenses are doing and, kind of getting us into the right protection. I think we like to take our shots offensively. And so, I think if we can get us in the right protections and be able to pick up some blitzes, we can take shots downfield. I think that was something I struggled with last year is, kind of just taking control, at the quarterback position and making sure that we're picked up. So I think that's one of the big things for me. Another big one's just footwork. Just being really consistent with my feet. Dropping quick. Getting rid of the ball on time, especially when we get blitzed, and allowing for our guys to go out and make plays in space. And then, honestly, the biggest thing is, having the trust that I have with our guys now, going off of a full off season. I think it allows for us to have even more explosives because I can get the ball to them quicker. And I mean that in the sense of trusting them to go win on a post and, throwing it before he breaks instead of, kind of holding on to it for another second and making sure that he's open. Just kind of having that faith and that trust in those guys to go run under one or, go win their one-on-ones. And, I think, like I said, having that off season, the past couple months with those guys has been crucial, and I think it's gonna pay off for sure.
The knowledge standpoint you alluded to, protections and just getting everyone squared away at the line of scrimmage, how much do you feel differently from, say, a calendar year ago as far as you're getting there and maybe you're recognizing someone on defense who's positioned a little differently, and that kind of sets off triggers in your mind? Just how many leaps do you feel like you've taken in that regard just over a year?
Yeah, I think it's night and day. I think it starts on our side of the ball. I think, being able to really be in the offense for, over a year now and really understand what Coach Bell wants and likes to do, I think it makes it easier for me to get guys lined up for starters. I think there's times where if we're going tempo, it's harder to pick up the signals. And so if I can just tell them, hey, you go out here, you run this route, because I'm getting it in the headset, it's like, yeah, if we can snap the ball 2 seconds faster, that might be the difference between a 5-yard gain and a 50-yard touchdown. And so, I think being able to get those guys lined up is big, just kind of, helping them out as much as they can. It's tough for them to, sprint to their position and also pick up a signal and know what to do. So, I think that helps a lot. And then, obviously, just being able to break down the defense a little bit more. I think Coach Sanders is doing a really great job of shaking things up, and those defensive guys are really giving us a lot of great looks. And so, I think just being able to watch film and see what they like to do and, see the kind of things that they do when they play different coverages, I think that helps us a lot. And, I think our receivers are doing a really great job of identifying coverages as well and, understanding, certain routes, when to get to their depth, when to speed cut it, those kinds of things. I think that makes it easier on me, too. So, all in all, I think everybody's doing a really great job with that.
When you self-critique yourself, you always say, I'm trying to do too much, right? I'm trying to do this. But you're pretty good at improvising. How hard is it to kind of balance that, I guess?
100%. Coach Bell and I talk about that a lot. It's kind of, take what the defense is giving you. It's getting deep zone, just checking the ball down and moving on to the next play. But when a guy gets beat or kind of somebody busts on a route, it's kind of just okay. Now it's time to improvise and go make a play. It's kind of just understanding when not to kind of try and do a little bit more. I think that's kind of more of a feel thing, and Coach Bell and I talk about that a lot. Of there's times where it's okay, we messed it up, don't make it worse and just move on. But there's also times where it's like, hey, you can get out and extend and make a play here. And I think just kind of trying to find that fine line. That's something that we've been working on, and so I think it's gonna come, and I think we've been doing a great job with that. But I think it also is kind of in the spur of the moment too. You kind of just feel it, and you're like, okay, let's go make a play. So.
In that same light, I mean, how much peace of mind do you have with Nictino at left tackle this season? Huge,
100%. He's done such a great job, and that goes for everybody up front too. I think we've taken really massive strides as a group up there, and Nictino is no exception. He's really done a great job of picking up the offense. And then obviously, just having that trust with him at left tackle, to protect my blind spot, it helps a ton. And it helps to be able to keep your eyes downfield and not feel any pressure from that left side. Like I said, it goes for everybody up front. Done a really great job with that. So it helps a lot for sure, especially for kind of a younger guy. So.
It's pretty much a new look tight end room for you guys with a couple transfers. I mean, what have you just seen out of that unit so far in fall camp?
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those things where it's kind of just feeding the hot hand, and everybody's going to play. I think those guys have, like you said, transfers coming in, learning a different offense. It's tough for them, but they've done a really great job with that. Max has kind of really taken that next step as a leader in that room. Being one of the only guys really returning and kind of understanding and knowing the offense, and so he's helped out a ton with those guys. And I think we just got a lot of athleticism and a lot of talent in that room, and it's gonna help out a lot. They're a smart group. And so, they understand, the different kinds of defenses that we're getting, and, kind of when to sit it down in certain coverages, and, kind of when to, go out and make a play. And so, that helps a ton. They're kind of another quarterback on the field. And so, they're doing a great job, and I'm excited for what they're going to show this year.
How much do you feel like what you can do with your legs, like you showed last year, can just be a component for the offense, moving the sticks and just keeping the D on their toes?
A ton. And, I think that's another thing that Coach Bell and I talk about a lot is, using the legs to as an advantage. There were times where, earlier in the year, kind of was getting a little confused, seeing a bunch of different looks and, kind of just using the legs and taking off and running. But now I think I can use that as more of a skill to like we said, extend plays, but also kind of just stealing first downs. We talk about that a lot. Is stealing first downs with the legs. It opens up everything else too, because that's one less guy that's either rushing or playing in coverage that has to be in a spy if you're consistently moving the chains with your feet. And so that just helps out the run game, and it helps out the pass game a whole lot too. So I think I got to utilize that a lot more. Coach Bell, like I said, Coach Bell and I talk about that a lot, and I think that's something that I've been trying to do during camp, and just got to keep working at it for sure.
Talking to Coach Narduzzi this morning, he threw out 2 wide receivers we really haven't heard a lot about. What can you tell us about this, how things are going with Tyreek Robinson and Demetrius McCray?
Yeah, those guys are doing a fantastic job. Tyreek, he's a character for sure. I love Tyreek. Great kid, and I think what was that?
We heard a story about it.
Well, oh no, that's probably not a good thing. Oh, the fish? Oh, yeah, that's. Oh, Tyreek, man. I love that kid. No, he's doing a great job. I think we've been kind of moving him around a little bit in different spots, and, he's adapting really well. And, I think that just speaks to, how hard he's worked this camp and, even this offseason to kind of try and learn every position and just trying to get on the field as much as he can. That's helped out a lot. And Demetrius is doing a really great job, too. He's a guy that we can trust to go up and get a one-on-one. I think he's really working his tail off to learn this offense too. It's tough for those guys. It's a tough offense for them, and being early guys, they're working every single day. I think Coach Bell said that Demetrius called one of our coaches and was calling him about install at 11:30 at night the other night. That's just, I love that. I love the type of kid he is, his work ethic, and he's going to go out in the field and show it too. He's a really strong kid. Uses his body well, and can go up and make contested catches. I love that out of him. So he's just going to continue to grow and get better, and I'm excited to see that for sure.
Anything else? Thanks.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.